Things have been pretty quiet for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail lately, and then just like that, the Irish flipped two players on the same day, including a quarterback. How it happened and what it means for the class of 2025 is next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018 and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. I appreciate you joining me here on this Wednesday, October 16th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. As always, you can listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch the full episode on YouTube as well. If you are watching along, this is a reminder to please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, or if you're listening to the pod, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, normally, Wednesdays are reserved for game previews during the season, but we're changing it up this week because Notre Dame flipped not one, but two players in the class of 2025 on Monday, and there might be one more on the way in the near future. Luke Smith and I didn't even have time to address it on yesterday's show because we had to talk about the biggest news, and that is Benjamin Morrison's season-ending injury. So we're going to change things up today. You can catch my Georgia Tech preview on tomorrow's show, but we got two new commitments to talk about, and we're going to start with the quarterback. 4-star Blake Hebert out of the Brunswick School in Greenwich, Connecticut. Hebert is actually the third commitment in this class from Brunswick, along with safety Ethan Long and offensive lineman Maddie Augustine. That has to be some kind of record, right? Like, how often do you see three players from the same school, especially one located in Greenwich, Connecticut, commit to Notre Dame all in the same class? It's a bit of a surprise. But as for Hebert, he is the 29th ranked quarterback in the class in the 400 player overall, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's got good size for a quarterback, listed as 6'3", 215 pounds. And even though I'll admit, I think that 215 number might be a little bit inflated because we know how heights and weights work with recruits, but still, he does have good size. You can't really debate that. And he had actually been committed to Clemson since June 16th of 2023, but Notre Dame was able to flip him just a few months before the early signing day. My biggest takeaway for Notre Dame as it pertains to Hebert, this is a move that they had to make, not necessarily the move that they wanted to make. We know the move that they wanted to make. They wanted the 5-star quarterback Deuce Knight. They went all in on Knight over a year ago. They got his commitment, and then they stayed all in on Deuce Knight for probably too long because Deuce Knight made it clear pretty much at the end of July that he was likely going to end up at Auburn. He basically took weekly visits to the Auburn campus every single weekend, but Notre Dame stayed all in on Deuce Knight until he finally made his flip official, and then Notre Dame had to resort to a backup plan because they absolutely needed a quarterback in this class. You need a quarterback in every single class, given how guys transfer at this position every single year, and Notre Dame was in a really tough spot once Deuce flipped because they did not have that much time to work with. And right now, you look at the depth chart at Notre Dame, 3 of the guys on scholarship, Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr, are slated to be on the roster next season. But odds are one of those guys is going to transfer. I'm not going to pick who yet. I'm not going to guess right now, but just knowing how the quarterback position operates, not just in the transfer portal era, but just for as long as quarterbacks have been able to transfer in college football, guys move around all the time because only one player can start. And then if you're a backup or you're buried on the depth chart and you realize you're not going to play, you probably are going to transfer. So Notre Dame needs another scholarship quarterback in the room so that way next year they do have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. And now Notre Dame got their guy in this class. That's the good part. And I credit the staff for getting this one done quickly and quietly because I was stunned when I saw it on my social media feed. I opened up Instagram and then I saw that Blake Hebert announced his commitment, and it was a collab with the official Notre Dame football Instagram account. And I was like, I had to triple check it. Like, wait, what? Because it came out of nowhere. Nobody was really talking about Blake Hebert's name. Once Deuce Knight flipped, there was reports about, the quarterback committed to North Carolina and Cal and maybe even SMU. But Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports put out a great article about how this all came together. So Hebert visited Notre Dame in June of 2023. That was actually a couple weeks before Deuce Knight took his first visit to Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame staff offered Hebert a scholarship. But then 2 days later, Hebert announced he was going to commit to Clemson, and it was a bit of a surprise just given the timing of it all. Like usually, if a player commits to a school just a couple days after the official visit, it's the school that they visited, not a school that is basically one of their rivals these days. But that is what happened with Hebert. So then Notre Dame put all of their effort into getting either Deuce Knight or Bear Bachmeier. They clearly prioritized Deuce Knight. They got Knight to commit first, and then we all saw how that turned out over the course of the next year. But then once Deuce Knight announces flip, or maybe even before that, behind the scenes, Notre Dame's coaching staff reached out to Hebert and the quarterback from Hawaii who is committed to Cal, and those are the two main guys that they try to get to flip at this point in time. And as I said, I did not see this coming with Hebert, especially the timing of it all, but I also didn't really see anyone else mention his name either, which is a bit of a surprise given the history, but it seemed like he had moved on. He was fully committed to Clemson, but Notre Dame saw an opening and they attacked. Now that the dust has settled, it does make sense that Notre Dame would go back to him, given how receptive he was to their calls and how much they wanted him, over a year and a half ago. So now he is Irish. That is how it went down. Notre Dame was able to capitalize on the backup plan, and they got a quarterback in the class of 2025, which is very, very important. However, if you're trying to compare Deuce Knight to Blake Hebert as a prospect, don't. Because it is not particularly close at this point in time, in my opinion. And clearly the Notre Dame coaching staff as well, or else they wouldn't have gone all in on Knight like they did. From what I've watched, Hebert is clearly a developmental prospect. I don't think there's anything elite about his game right now. Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily put up a YouTube video of all of Hebert's plays cut up from the 2025 season, and I'd encourage you to go check it out and form your own opinion, but this is mine. I think he's got good size. He's got above average arm talent. He can run the ball. He is a mobile quarterback, which is good for a player his size, but the competition he faces in Connecticut is just not very good. He has a tendency to stare some guys down. He misses on some easy throws. Now, in fairness to him, the skill players that he's working with at Brunswick School aren't really that great. Like, he has a perfect deep ball to this receiver. He's number 11. It's like a perfect post route, hits him right in the breadbasket, and he drops the ball. So that's obviously not Hebert's fault. That was a perfect ball. He actually does throw a good deep pass, but there's a couple other throws, actually multiple throws in there. I'm like, man, that doesn't really look that good. And then he'll make one where he throws like from the opposite hash to the sideline, and that's a really good ball. So there are some things that excite you clearly. And I think when he kind of rose to stardom as a recruit was after his sophomore year, because he started that full year, but then he missed all of his junior season with the fractured ankle. So I guess it's not really that shocking that he was pretty rusty at the beginning of his season. That sophomore year, he completed 111 of 185 passes for just over 1,700 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and 1 interception in 12 games. So when you look at his full body of work, I believe that his ranking right now as the 29th ranked quarterback in the class is on point. He's not a top 10 quarterback. I don't think he's a top 20 quarterback. I've also talked to some people who've had a chance to see him up close, and they were pretty lukewarm on him as well. Again, there are some things that excite you. That's why Notre Dame took him, but I think it's just going to take a really long time before he can develop into a Power 4 level college quarterback. And so I say all this to say that does not mean that he can't eventually develop into a really good quarterback. That is certainly possible. Guys improve. They get better. And from a personality standpoint, I think that Hebert is a great fit at Notre Dame, which is why I think Notre Dame was willing to go after him pretty hard, because if he's willing to stick around and develop over the next several years, this is a good take for Notre Dame, because the plan is still for either Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr to start the next 2, maybe even 3 years. And maybe by that point, Hebert's game is developed enough that he is ready to go. Maybe he is ready to take the reins. But again, it's kind of rare for these quarterbacks to stick around that long. But again, maybe Hebert is different. And then if Hebert doesn't work out, you've got Noah Grubb, who's a highly rated quarterback recruit in the class of 2026 from Florida. And that looks like a guy who could potentially rise up the recruiting ranks as well. It might not be quite the rise that we saw with Deuce Knight, who wasn't even a top 150 player when Notre Dame was initially recruiting him, and then he shot all the way up to a top 30 player in the country, 5-star quarterback, all that stuff. So Notre Dame has shown that they have been pretty good at evaluating talent early, and they were on Hebert early. Now, I would say that his stock has taken a little bit of a dip since then, partially because of the injury that he suffered his junior year and what he's been able to do over the camp circuits and all that stuff. But still, Notre Dame needed a quarterback. They got one. By adding Hebert, it gives you some cushion, and it's someone who could theoretically bridge that gap from Minchie or Carr into Grubb, and that is why this was such an important pickup. The main thing here, this is not the move that they wanted to make. but they needed to make it, and sometimes those are the ones that end up working out. Like, as we have seen from many Notre Dame quarterbacks in the past, it's not always the highly touted guy who ends up being the starter for an extended period of time. I mean, Ian Book was an afterthought, and then became the winningest quarterback in school history. There was a point in time where Deshaun Kaiser looked like he was going to quit the team because he was so buried on the depth chart, but he stuck around, and then he ended up getting drafted in the second round. So there's really no way of telling for sure how these guys are going to pan out. That's why I always say whenever I talk about a recruit, there's no way of knowing whether he will pan out or not, no matter what his ranking is. But I'm just telling you, when I look at Hebert, I see a developmental prospect, but the most important thing is that Notre Dame got a guy at quarterback in the class of 2025. Hebert was not the only commitment, though. The Irish flipped a really talented offensive lineman who is committed to Iowa, and it adds to an already loaded class of offensive linemen. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime has this awesome new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There are so many great events going on right now, especially in the sports world. You've got college football and NFL. Both of them are in full swing. You've got the MLB playoffs, which have been amazing. NBA and NHL, they're about to start up. So there's so many great options for you. Get off your couch, head to the game with Gametime. But personally, my favorite thing about the Gametime app is that you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time. On the same day that Notre Dame was able to flip Blake Hebert from Clemson, they were also able to flip a 4-star interior offensive lineman, Cameron Heron, from Iowa. But Heron is actually an in-state product. He plays for Warren Central in Indianapolis. Notre Dame is very familiar with Warren Central. They recruited Damian Shanklin, who is there for, I think some people even have him as a 5-star edge rusher, who Notre Dame was at one point considered the leader for, and then he ultimately committed to LSU. But Heron has been on campus many times in the past, and this recruitment goes way back, but it really all came together this past weekend, and now he ended up with the Irish. Right now, the 24/7 Sports Composite has Heron as a 3-star and the number 31 ranked interior offensive lineman in the class, but I'm telling you, man, I think he's underrated. I think a big reason why he's ranked so low on the recruiting charts is because of his size. He's listed as 6'3", 275 pounds, and I'll give you 275 pounds is not that big for an interior offensive lineman. But when you see a picture of Cameron Herron, you realize why I'm so confident that he is going to eventually fill out. He is jacked. He's not like a pudgy high schooler that can just kind of maul dudes. No. Heron looks like he's already been in a college weight program, but he hasn't, and he has a lot more room to grow, and I think that he will once he gets to Notre Dame. Heron has visited Notre Dame a bunch of times in the past. He did a camp there as well, but Notre Dame did not have a scholarship offer for him, so he committed to Iowa back in June. And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what changed for Notre Dame and their scholarship numbers and all that and the way that they kind of looked at the situation, but a spot opened up, and then Heron was on campus for the Stanford game this past weekend. Then Notre Dame offered him an official scholarship, and then he wasted no time announcing his commitment. He then made it official on Monday morning. And look, I'm not going to pretend like I'm a great scout of high school offensive linemen or really college offensive linemen as well. Like I get the basics. I have tried really hard to learn the fundamentals of offensive line play because it is so crucial, obviously, to football. But if you don't really play the position, it's kind of hard to pick up on all the nuances and all that stuff. So despite my efforts, I admit that it is a bit of a blind spot in football scouting for me. So if you want a more expert opinion on offensive line play, and specifically the play of Cameron Herron, I want to share a scouting report from Greg Biggins, who's a scout for 24/7 Sports. Quote, Heron has some of the quickest feet of any offensive lineman in the class, moves really well laterally, and has no problems getting to the second level and taking on a linebacker or safety. Powerful upper body and is a road grader in the run game, gets off the ball really well, stays low and plays with great leverage, plays with advanced technique, and has a really nice all-around skill set to be an impact player at the college level, end quote. So you read all that and you're like, wait, why is this guy a 4-star at least, right? I'm telling you, I think it's because of his size and the fact that he's from Indiana. The biggest knock on him is his weight, but I'm telling you, look at this kid. I'm not worried about whether or not he's going to be able to adapt once he hits a college weight program. Like, he looks like a guy who's going to hit the ground running under Lauren Landau, and he's going to get big, and he's get big in a hurry. Is he going to be able to hold that weight? Now, that is a different story because, that is something that we have talked at length about with Emil Wagner. But hey, he's been holding up just fine at right tackle all year, even though he might not be 300 pounds. So you look at Cameron Heron, you also see he's got really long arms, which is encouraging too, because it allows you to get separation and pass blocking. And I feel like that is really good. You have more leverage too, because he's able to get great leverage. And what I like about him and his fit with this class is that he's a true interior offensive lineman. That is something that Notre Dame really needed in this class. They are loaded at tackle. They have Will Black, who's a borderline 5-star, depending on where you look. I believe that On3 has Will Black as like the number 2 or 3 player nationally in the class. No one else is that high in it, but hey, hopefully On3 is right. They were also extremely high in Charles Jagasaw as well. Notre Dame also has a commitment from Owen Straybeck in Matty Augustine. So that's 3 true tackles in this class, and now they have a 4th offensive line commitment and 1 true interior offensive lineman. And when you look at Notre Dame's current depth chart on the offensive line, they're loaded on the interior. They've been stocking that up for years, but they were getting a little bit thin on the outside. That's why Anthony Knapp is starting at left tackle for Notre Dame this season. And this is another really, really good offensive line class. And even though the offensive line has struggled this year for Notre Dame, a lot of that has to do with inexperience and injuries and things like that. But they have got so much young talent, first of all, coming their way in this class and also currently in that room. Like, it's actually crazy. I have no idea who the starting 5 is going to be next season. They could technically run back the entire offensive line that they hope to start the season with Charles Jagasaw at left tackle, and then Sam Pendleton, who won the job at left guard, Ashton Craig at center, Billy Strouth at right guard, and then Emil Wagner at right tackle. That is the group that was supposed to start before Charles Jagasaw tore his pec, and then Anthony Knapp started at left tackle, and Sam Pendleton won that job at left guard over Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan. But then where does that leave Anthony Knapp, who is a true freshman, who is going to start a full season at left tackle, which has not been done since, I believe, Sam Young did it, because even when Joe Alt came in, he did it halfway through the season, and Blake Fisher was projected to start the whole season, but then he ended up missing the bulk of the regular season after he suffered a knee injury against Florida State in the season opener. So it's very rare for a true freshman to start a full season at any position on the offensive line, especially left tackle. So is he going to play this whole season, start this whole season, and then not start next year? I don't know. And then Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler. Those guys have been solid replacements on the line this year. They started a lot of games last season. They both have eligibility next year, so they could come back and compete for a spot. And those are just the guys who have played this year. I mean, Gerby Lambert, former 5-star, he's built like a future first-rounder. He's going to be ready to play soon, probably as early as next year when it comes to starting. And then we also know that the staff is really high on Sullivan Absher. Where does that leave him? So assuming that all of these guys I just mentioned come back next year, which probably won't happen, and that is going to sort itself out somewhat, there are 10 legitimate contenders with starting experience to play 5 spots. And then you've got this class coming in with Will Black. I don't expect any of these guys to be competing as a true freshman, but hey, Notre Dame has played true freshman offensive linemen recently, so it's not out of the question. When I look at the room, the only player who I am certain will start next year at his current position is Ashton Craig at center. The staff believes that he's a future All-American, NFL first-rounder. That is why he was such a big blow, or his injury was such a big blow to this season. I think Billy Strouth is a lock to start as well. Not sure which guard spot he's going to take. Is he more comfortable at right guard? That's what he's been playing this year. So I'd assume he's going to start there. I think it's very likely that he'll start at right guard. Maybe he wants to move over to left guard. We will see. But could they move Charles Jagasaw inside to guard too, because he was going to start at left tackle? But then you've got Gerby Lambert and Anthony Knapp. Like, how does that change things? And then Emil Wagner, he's just been really solid over there at right tackle all season long. Are you going to replace him as the starter? Because then you would basically have Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton bench next year after starting this whole season under the premise that they were kind of the future of this line. Anything is possible under Joe Rudolph. We have seen him make pretty surprising changes in preseason camp back-to-back years now. You look back 2 years ago, everyone thought that it was going to be Billy Strouth and then Andrew Kristofich starting at guards, and then he went with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler because they won the job in preseason camp. Going into camp this year, Anthony Knapp ended up winning the job because of an injury to Charles Jagasaw, but at one point it looked like Tosh Baker was going to start over him. He's a fifth-year graduate student. Anthony Knapp beat him out as a true freshman. People thought it was a competition between Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, maybe even Selvin Apsher at left guard, and guess who won that? It was Sam Pendleton. So these guys are going to win these competitions at a very young age and then get beaten out as early as next year. It's all possible. The only thing that Joe Rudolph has taught us is that you never really know what he's going to do. Everything is in open competition at all times. So Notre Dame's offensive line should be back to its dominant self in short order because they continue to recruit at a really high clip, and they've done it again in this class. I love Will Black, Matty Augustine, Owen Strabik, and now Cameron Heron. That is a really, really impressive group, and as it pertains to Heron, I'm telling you, he's underrated. It's probably going to take some time. He's definitely got to fill out, but I think in a couple years, you're going to be talking about Cameron Heron as Notre Dame's next great guard. All right, there are more flips on the way, because the Irish did put themselves in really good position to flip a wide receiver who is currently committed to SMU after he took an official visit this past weekend. More on that right after this. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All right, here's my pick this week. We've been giving out winners, so if you're looking for ways to spend those $200 in bonus bets, I'm going to give you a pick today. We've been riding high in Thursday Night Football as of late, and I like the Saints to cover plus 2.5 at home against the Broncos. Probably not going to be the most entertaining game. I'm going to be honest with you. The Saints don't have Carr, and the Broncos have Bo Nix, who's been really up and down during his rookie season, but you're giving me points at home with the New Orleans Saints in the Superdome when that place is going to be in prime time, going crazy. I like the Saints, and for more, just visit FanDuel.com today. All right, now that we've talked about the flips that did happen, let's talk about one that could happen here very soon. Notre Dame put themselves in great position to flip SMU wide receiver commit Jalen Cooper, who just made his first visit to Notre Dame this past weekend to watch the Irish take on the Stanford Cardinal. And by all accounts, Notre Dame absolutely knocked it out of the park with this visit. And really, Notre Dame made him a priority once they missed out on some of the other top prospects at wide receiver this past summer, and for good reason. He is a very talented player. The 24/7 Sports Composite has him ranked as the 33rd ranked wide receiver in the class and a top 250 player overall nationally. He's 6'2", but he's very skinny. He's only 165 pounds. He's definitely going to have to bulk up once he gets to college, but he is extremely fast. And that is what Notre Dame is really focused on getting once they didn't get Derek Meadows and Dylan Robinson. They wanted guys who had game-breaking speed, who might not be the most polished wide receivers just yet, but they feel like they can develop them once they get to campus. But you can't really teach speed, and Cooper certainly has a lot of it. He lit it up his junior year. And Cooper's playing in Texas, playing against really good competition down there. You know the show respects Texas high school football, and we love Ohio high school football as well. Well, Cooper in his junior year, look at this stat line. 68 catches, 1,661 receiving yards, in 23 touchdowns. 23 touchdowns as a junior in Texas. It's really, really impressive, man. He has been committed to SMU since July, so he's got a tough decision to make now. This was his first visit to Notre Dame, and most of the schools that we're looking at Cooper are from Texas, Baylor, SMU. Like, this would be a big change of pace for Cooper to kind of get outside of his comfort zone down there and make the trip up to South Bend permanently. And Notre Dame has done it before. They got Jane Greathouse. They were able to land Braylon James from Texas, although he ended up at TCU, which is probably a good thing for all parties. But when I look at Cooper, I just see a guy with game-breaking speed, and this is what Notre Dame has wanted. They got Antavius Richardson, who was committed to USF because of his speed and his athleticism. Like, Richardson plays quarterback for his high school, so he's still very raw as a prospect, but this guy is a freak athlete. So they've already added Richardson. If they add Cooper, they would have Elijah Burris, Jerome Bettis Jr., Richardson, and then Cooper. So that'd be 4 wide receivers in this class, although I got to say, there seems to be more and more momentum that Jerome Bettis Jr. is going to end up playing at safety. But if they do get Cooper, I actually think he would be the best of the bunch. Now, Elijah Burris would certainly compete with that because he's been having a really, really good senior season. It's actually funny. One of my buddies, Spencer Scannell, is the defensive coordinator over there at Don Bosco in New Jersey, and they played Elijah Burris' high school, and Burris had 2 touchdowns on him, and he burned one of their top cornerbacks for a touchdown. So I've talked to people who have seen him up close, and Elijah Burris is a really good player. So at one point, things were really, really grim for this Notre Dame wide receiver class, but They have been able to salvage it already a little bit by adding Richardson. If they're able to get Cooper, that would be a pretty solid group. Now, none of these guys are going to be in a position to play right away. I think Notre Dame really thought Derek Meadows could do that. He's playing the boundary wide receiver, someone with his side, his athleticism. It's pretty rare, but he's going to end up at LSU. But fortunately, Notre Dame is in a position where they have guys like Mikey Gilbert and Cam Williams, two guys who are currently freshmen. Cam Williams is going to redshirt, it looks like, and maybe even Mikey Gilbert as well. If those guys take big strides next year, you got KK Smith coming back, and you've got other guys in that room like Jaden Greathouse. Hopefully he takes the leap here so soon this season, then he could really step up next season. Like, there is some young talent in this room, and I fully expect Notre Dame is going to be very active in the transfer portal once again at wide receiver because, it's been a little bit hit or miss for Notre Dame this year in the transfer portal. Let's be honest. Like, we know what people think about Riley Leonard. You either love him or you hate him, and then they missed on RJ Oben, but they hit big with Jordan Clark. And I thought Rod Hurd, even though he's not a starter, has been a pretty solid hit. Mitch Jeter is hurt right now, but he was a hit absolutely against Texas A&M. Jane Harrison hasn't been quite the hit in the return game, but he's brought something as a receiver. And in the past, Notre Dame has been really good at evaluating transfers. So I think that they're going to be pretty aggressive going after more wide receivers again this year. And I get asked all the time, like, when is Notre Dame going to start recruiting the elite wide receivers? When are they going to start landing the Derek Meadows and the other five-star guys? Well, first of all, they need to have a passing game that is enticing to a five-star wide receiver. And lately, over the past few years, they have not really had that. And they also have not had enough guys at the wide receiver position make it to the NFL. I mean, Chase Claypool was the last one to get drafted pretty high. Ben Skoranek has been hanging out in the NFL. But if you're recruiting guys who are five-stars and you're like, hey, you can be Ben Skoranek when you make it to the league, that's not all that exciting. Let's just be real with it. So in order for Notre Dame to kind of turn the tide at wide receiver, they need some of these under-the-radar guys to really hit big. And Will Fuller was a three-star once upon a time who barely had any offers, and then look what ended up happening to him when he was in college. And Mike Mickens, who deserves all the credit in the world for turning around that cornerback room and making it a strength. And now the safeties are a strength as well. So that has completely changed in a few years, but it didn't happen overnight. A big reason why the cornerback room was able to change and become the strength that it is now is because Mike Mickens is an elite evaluator of talent. And he recruited Benjamin Morrison really, really hard. And Morrison was outside the top 300. He was not a lock by any stretch, but Mickens saw in him this type of potential, got him to come to Notre Dame, started as a true freshman, is one of the best cornerbacks in the history of Notre Dame, and then seeing the success that Morrison had, and also what Mickey had done at Cincinnati, getting Sauce Gardner, I think then it allowed Notre Dame to attract Christian Gray, who's a highly ranked prospect, and now Leonard Moore, and that is the future of the Notre Dame cornerback room. They got one under-the-radar guy in Benjamin Morrison and some other nice pieces around him, and then they got highly ranked guys in Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. Now that room is a strength. It started with Morrison. Who is going to be that wide receiver next for Notre Dame who might be a little bit under the radar but then explodes and then makes it a much more attractive spot? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. I thought maybe it could be Jaden Greathouse. He's been a little bit slow to develop this year. Like, he's been good. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been the wide receiver one that we're all hoping him to be because that would have been a really big win for Notre Dame. It could still happen. Maybe it's next year. We're going to have to wait and see. But maybe Micah Gilbert or maybe Cam Williams, who actually was a five-star, but clearly is very raw, and that's why he's not playing right now. If one of those guys hits and hits big, that is going to really change the Notre Dame passing game. And then once that happens, then you're going to have more high-end recruits willing to commit to Notre Dame at the wide receiver position. And that's really what it's going to take because I just don't think Notre Dame is going to have that much success trying to recruit these really talented wide receivers when they're just not really a passing offense. It's going to happen in time, I think. Adding Mike Denbrock, I think he's actually been pretty open to the recruits. Like, hey, I don't have all the pieces I want yet. I need you to come change that. Notre Dame is attracting guys with speed, and then once they develop them, if they can become real differences on the outside, then you're going to start to see the quality of prospect change in Notre Dame, specifically at wide receiver. And then Notre Dame might have a real elite passing game with an elite quarterback. I mean, that seems like so far-fetched now, but in order for that to happen, they're going to have to start landing on some of these under-the-radar guys. And they, to their credit, they have been recruiting these guys really aggressively, and if they can land these evaluations, things are going to be looking up for the Notre Dame offense. All right, that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we flip the page to Georgia Tech. I'm going to have my full preview of that game. Hopefully, by that point, we're going to have a little bit more clarity about the health of Georgia Tech starting quarterback Haynes King. It seems like his status is up in the air right now. I don't think he's going to play based on the line movement, but you're going to hear all of that tomorrow, so make sure you tune in. And also remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you then.